history-changing event, he spoke a clear, concise command to ordinary people who were about to do extraordinary things through him. Fear not. With few exceptions, when God presented a great opportunity or mission to a particular individual, the assignment came with those two powerful words, fear not. He said to Abraham when he called him out of Ur to pioneer a new nation, Genesis 15:1. Moses, who was to bring God's people out of bondage, Numbers 21:34. Joshua, the one who was to lead the people into the promised land, Joshua 1:9. Mary, who would give birth to the hope of mankind, Luke 1:30. Simon Peter, who would become the apostle of hope, Luke 5:10. Paul, who was to be the instrument through which most of the New Testament books were written, Acts 27:24. This strong admonition to courage was reserved not only for individuals but entire groups of people as well, like the children of Israel when God set the land of promise before them, Deuteronomy 1:21, or the disciples when Jesus sent them out for the first time to spread the good news, Matthew 10:28. History-changing manifestations of God's power and promise were preceded by a command to overcome the fear that greets those who stand at the threshold of such monumental opportunities. One of the things that jumped out at me as I studied the fear nots of the Bible is that I had never really empathized with the fears of these biblical heroes. I assumed that they obeyed God without any thought of the consequences of their obedience. Why? Because I knew the end of their stories. They all succeeded. There's nothing like success to make us forget the fear they had to overcome. Fear of failure, fear of rejection, even fear of death. We know the outcome, but they didn't. They were ordinary people subject to the same fears you and I would have if we were in their shoes. Imagine Moses, outnumbered by an enemy king's army, yet God told him to fight them anyway. How would you feel if you faced what appeared to be certain defeat? You'd be afraid, just as he was. But God said, fear not. This command from the Lord is a common thread woven throughout the pages of Scripture. An old Bible teacher once said that when something is repeated a lot in the Bible, you need to ask yourself, what's it there for? So why the focus on fear? Why not be careful or be nice to everyone? What is it about fear that would cause God to bring it up so much? Because he wants us to be faithful and knows that fear cancels out our faith. Think about it. Faith says, I can do all things. Fear says, what will they think of us? What will they do to us? Faith says, if God commands it, I'll do it. Fear says, maybe he didn't mean that literally. Faith and fear are opposites. It is impossible for faith and fear to equally coexist in your life. You can't step out in faith if you're shrinking back in fear. Take, for instance, Joshua, Moses' assistant, whom modern military leaders have studied because of his military prowess. Moses, the one whom God called from the backside of the desert to lead his people out of bondage, was not allowed to enter the promised land because of disobedience. A new generation had come to maturity in the wilderness as the faithless and rebellious generation had died off. It was a history-changing time to enter the land of promise and see the formation of a new nation that would forever change human history. In preparation for this epic event, God promoted Joshua to lead the children of Israel across the Jordan into the land promised to generation after generation over the previous 470 years. As he had done in the past and continues to do today, God preceded his call to action with another order. Be strong and of good courage. Do not be afraid nor be dismayed, for the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Joshua 1:9. Even though God promised to be with him, Joshua had plenty of reasons to be afraid. The promise to enter the land of milk and honey had been passed down from generation to generation with hope and anticipation. It was a promise that no doubt many had held on to in those dark days of bondage in Egypt. But that same promise had been true 40 years earlier when the children of Israel refused to cross over into the promised land, choosing instead to believe the report of the 10 faithless spies who feared the supersized enemy. Their fear canceled out their faith in God.